Hello and welcome to this Lab 2 instruction video on measures of variability and measures of center. We're going to use 2018 GSS data in SPSS to produce and interpret the following: a frequency table with both interval ratio level data as well as nominal ordinal level data. We're going to do a histogram, a bivariate table, and a bar graph summarizing the mean of a variable across categories of another variable, so starting some bivariate sort of analysis. To start with, we're going to open SPSS. You can either open SPSS and then load the dataset, or if your dataset is already downloaded and already set up, you can just double click on that and it will load through SPSS like it is doing here. Alright, looks like SPSS is loaded, so we can go ahead and get started. So part 1, we're going to produce some descriptive statistics about an interval ratio level measure, age, and then we'll produce some for some ordinal and nominal level measures. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. Now I'm going to change this so that it shows the variable names rather than the descriptions, and I'm going to type in age. And when I type in age, it pops up here, and I can either click this button, or if I wanted to, I could click and drag it over to this window. Now we're not quite done. We need to go to Statistics here, and we need to select quartiles, standard deviation, range, minimum, maximum, as well as selecting the mean, median, and mode over here. Once we've done that, we hit Continue, OK, and this is what our output will look like. Now notice we have 2,341 valid cases in this data set, with only 7 people who didn't respond or whose answers aren't really intelligible. We have a mean of 48.97, a median of 48, and a mode of 34. Our mean and median being close together means that we probably have something that is possibly in general approaching a more normal distribution. We'll get into that a little bit more in coming weeks. We have a standard deviation of 18 and a mode of 34. So our mode is a little bit different than our mean and median. We have a range of 71, and that's the difference between our minimum here of 18 and our maximum of 89. We've also have percentages here for the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile, so we can use this to calculate the interquartile range, which would be 63, the 75th percentile, minus 34, which is the 25th percentile, giving us an interquartile range of 29. So excluding those extremes of 18 and 89, if you so chose. Probably not that necessary here. We can also look at this frequency table and see that we have about 1.7% of the population is 22. And if we scroll down to 66, we can see that about 80.2% of our sample here is between the ages of 66 and 18. Alright, so that's what we would do for an interval or ratio level data. Let's move on and talk about how we would do this with ordinal and nominal level measures. Same thing we're going to do for ordinal and nominal level measures. We're going to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. We're going to remove age from here, and instead I'm going to type in AstroPsi and move that over. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to type in RELIG, move that over, and finally I'm going to type in LERPERSN and move that over. So we're going to look at astrology as a science, what religion a person is, that's going to be our nominal data, and then how religious a person is, which is going to be ordinal. So we have ordinal, nominal, ordinal. I'm not going to change any of the statistics. I'm just going to click OK. Alright, so we have some kind of basic descriptive statistics here. We can see that astrology only has 1,140 valid cases, which means that there's 1,208 cases that are missing in some fashion. For religious preference and whether someone considers themselves a religious person, we have quite a few more cases to work with. And you notice that it still reports the mean, median, and mode. And what do we know about the mean, median, and mode for nominal and ordinal level data? Well, we know that the mean and the median aren't very useful. the average and the median aren't going to be useful here. The mode will be useful. We can see that the most common category here is 3, 1, and 2, which doesn't mean anything to us right now, but as we look into the frequency tables, we'll be able to have a better idea. It also reports the standard deviation. Again, not particularly useful here with nominal and ordinal level data. Neither is the range or the minimum, the maximum. They give us some ideas, but really the one we're going to pay attention to here is mode. The rest of these aren't super useful to us. So let's look at the frequency table here for astrology as scientific. And we can see that 77 people said that it is very scientific, 383 said it's sort of scientific, and 680 said it's very scientific. And notice that the total here for the people who actually answered the question is only 48.6%. So that means we should really be paying attention to this valid percent, not this total percentage, because we have so many missing cases. And if we look back here, we can see that not all at all scientific is the most frequent. And again, this is the third category listed here, and it is the mode listed here. So this not at all scientific is going to be our mode. Religious preference is listed here. And again, we can see that our mode is Protestant because it has the most responses. And again, we're going to want to take this valid percent because we do have some missing cases. Not a ton, but enough that we should take this valid percent here. Last, we have are consider self a religious person. We can see that we have the frequency here and the valid percent that we're going to want to focus on. Alright, so that's how we do frequency tables in SPSS. Let's continue on and look at histograms. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Graphs, Legacy Dialogues, Histogram, and here I'm going to switch it over to variable names, and we're going to type in age. Now histograms are good for doing interval ratio level data. Once we have our variable here, we're just going to hit OK. It'll take a moment for it to load. And alright, we got it loaded. So this is what our histogram for age looks like. We do have a quasi-normal distribution. We do have a peak here, and then it drops down in another peak. So this is what a histogram is going to look like. Notice the shape and how most frequencies tend to start taking on this sort of bell type curve, with cases clustered toward the middle, with less cases toward the edge. Alright, next we're going to do a graph of a frequency distribution that uses an ordinal level data. So let's go to Graphs. We're going to go to Legacy Dialogues, and we're going to go to Bar. And we want to select Simple and Summaries for Groups of Cases and hit Define. Again, going to have this display variable names. We're going to move AstroPsi. We're going to move that over to our category axis. We're going to click and drag it over to category axis, and then select percentage of cases instead of number of cases. So we're going to look at the percentage instead of the raw number, and then we're going to hit OK. And you can see we have our percentage graphs, right? Almost 60% say that it is not all scientific. Sort of scientific is just over 30%, and very scientific is under 10%. And again, these are going to be the valid percents. Alright, so we're going to do the same again for some different variables. Alright, so instead of astroscience, I want to type in religious person. Hit OK. And we can see that it shows us the distribution for whether the respondent considers themselves a religious person. So let's do a different one. Let's look at religion in general. You'll notice that this one has more categories, so it's going to be a little more spread out. But you can see that most people in the US think of themselves as Protestant, a few more as Catholic, and then much smaller numbers for everyone else, with the exception of people who are, say, none. They don't have a religion. Alright, Let's move on and talk about a bivariate table. So by doing this bivariate table using religious person, if they consider themselves a religious person, and this variable in astroscience, we're going to get an idea of how these categories overlap and interact with each other. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, but instead of going to frequencies, we're going to go to crosstabs. Again, I'm going to change this to variable names, and we're going to put religious person in the row, and we're going to put astrology as a science in the column. It's important to remember which is in the row and the column, so keep that in mind. And then we're just going to hit OK. Now, here we can see these crosstabs. For people who are very religious, 14 of them think that astrology is very scientific, 53 think of it as sort of scientific, and 130 think of them as not at all scientific. And we can see that of the people who are moderately religious, we can see their frequency distribution here. Conversely, we can think of things as for people who think of astrology as not at all scientific, 130 think of themselves as very religious, 233 think of themselves as moderately religious, 149 think of themselves as slightly religious, and 161 think of themselves as not at all religious. So this is sort of useful, but it'd be more useful if we could look at percentages. Again, we're going to go to Analyze, we're going to go to Descriptive, we're going to go to Crosstabs, and so from this page, instead of just clicking OK, we're going to go over here to Cells. And from Cells, we're going to select Row Percentages. I'm going to hit Continue, and then OK. Alright, so now we have a new table. And this table is showing us that of people who are very religious, 7% say that astrology is very scientific, 26.9% say they are sort of scientific, and 66% think of it as not at all scientific. And so we can read these across the rows. That's what it means by row percentage. We have to read these from the rows. And so we can see that of people who are very religious, moderately religious, slightly religious, or not religious at all, what percentage of them fall into the category of astrology is very scientific, sort of scientific, or not at all scientific. And so this is the benefit of doing crosstabs. We can kind of see how these distributions break down among different categories of a given variable. Finally, we're going to create a bar graph and try to visualize what we've just done. So we're going to go to Graphs, we're going to go to Legacy Dialogues, we're going to go to Bar, and instead of Simple, we're going to select Clustered and hit OK. Now from here, we are going to put, well, first I have to change this. From here, we're going to put Astro Science, astrology as a science. We're going to put that in the category axis. And then we are going to put religious person. We are going to put that in the define clusters by. From here, we're going to select percentage of cases here under this bars represent. And then we're going to hit OK. And so now we have how astrology is very scientific, broken down by how religious a person considers themselves. So we can see that for people that are not religious, that a little bit over 60-something% think of astrology as not at all scientific. Again, about 35%, and then again here, very small for people who think astrology is very scientific. It gives you a visual representation of these two variables. Let's try it with age instead. So we're going to go back to Graphs, we're going to go to Legacy Dialogues, and we're going to go to Bar. We're going to select Simple, and go here to Define. Alright, so we're going to remove religion from our category, and we're going to replace it with Astro Science. And then up here, instead of percentage of cases, we're going to select Other Statistic. And then we're going to put age there. And we're going to hit OK. Now what this has done is this has given the average age for people who think astrology is very scientific, sort of scientific, not at all scientific. There doesn't appear to be a huge difference between very scientific and sort of scientific, but it does appear that people who view astrology as not at all scientific are a little bit older. So let's use a different way of looking at age here. And we'll look at age as relates to how religious a person is. So we're going to go back to our bar graph. We're going to keep all those settings the same, but instead of astrology as a science, we're going to use how religious a person is, or rel person. We're going to keep mean age here, and we're going to hit OK. And we can see that there seems to be a trend here. People who are very religious tend to be older than people who are less religious. So this is an interesting insight. That's the lab. For your lab activity assignment, you'll be doing a lot of the same stuff with some slightly different variables, using college, if they took college science classes instead of religion for some of this, and going through a lot of these exercises that way. To access the lab, you'll need to go to Modules or Home, scroll down, and you can find the assignment here. Click on it, it'll take you to the quiz, and feel free to take that quiz when you feel like you are ready. The instructions are here as well. Thank you all. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.